Hey, what's up? It's Dave from I'mSimplyADad.com, and you're watching the Happy Healthy Family Podcast. As far as this book, your most recent book, it's Radical Metabolism, and it's written kind of as a weight loss book. And, you know, of course, it's great for people looking to lose weight and things like that. But to me, it seems more like it's really a book on overall health and healing. And so I think it's perfect for anyone battling any type of chronic symptom or chronic illness. Would you agree with that?
You know, it's true. And when we thought about the book, Radical Metabolism, and of course the subtitle is A Powerful New Plan to Blast Fat and Reignite Your Energy in 21 Days, it goes far beyond the inability to lose weight. It's all about the importance of detoxification, which everybody has wrong. So this flies in the face of what you've read in any other detox book, because I talk about the importance of bile, which is just as important as probiotics. I talk about the importance of omega-6, which we've gotten all wrong, and the importance of understanding that if you're not eliminating properly, if you're constipated, if you've got hypothyroidism, you've got to be looking at the gallbladder or lack thereof. So I'm making connections and connecting the dots, Dave, that nobody's connected before. But I have been in the field for 40 years, so I've been there, seen that, done that, and I have a little experience to know what I'm talking about.
Indeed, and not only that, you were one of the first people back in the day to suggest that the nonsensical high-carb, low-fat diet was not all that healthy, you know. and so you were at the forefront, and you continue to be in front of everybody else. So everybody out there listening, we need to pay attention to what Ann Louise says. So let's go ahead and start with the basics here. So we often hear about metabolism in the context of weight loss. But can you talk about what exactly metabolism is and why it goes far beyond just weight loss?
Well, to be honest with you, the way that I define it in Radical Metabolism is all the biological processes that occur on the cellular level. We're talking about the mitochondria, those little internal cellular plants that are so important for energy. So it has an awful lot to do with digestion, assimilation, which is everything in terms of health, and the ability to get nutrients in and toxins out. So many of us are suffering from what I call a toxic metabolism because there's so many environmental assaults, from the vaccinations and all the aluminum that may be in there as an additive, from the problems that you're getting in the air in terms of the nano aluminum that you could be breathing, to the glyphosates in our food. So we are barraged with a new set of toxins that make us unable to lose weight and detoxify the way we should unless we take special methods of boosting our bile and detoxifying the gallbladder. And all of that is written in the book. So this is not just a book for weight loss or no to slow losers, but for people that have autoimmune illness or mystery illnesses or orphan diseases where they have unresolved symptoms that they cannot address with any other program. Radical Metabolism has found its way into many people's hearts because we've dealt with autism to some degree. We deal with the inability to detoxify. This is very good for people with hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, and people without a gallbladder. And those are people that are usually not dealt with in most popular books.
Indeed. And so in your book, you wrote that we can only be as healthy as our cells. And that the health of our cells relies on the strong cell membranes. So can you talk about what you call membrane medicine and why our cell membranes are so important?
Well, cell membranes protect you from the toxins from the outside, and they enable you to get the nutrients coming within the cell because of the fluidity of the cell membrane in the first place, and they become fluid with the right omegas, but not omega-3 as we have been misdirected. It's actually omega-6 which strengthens the cell membrane. So I'm telling you to bring back the 6s. They strengthen the cell membrane. They're very sexy. They're good for your PMS, your menopause, your perimenopause, and they're also important for the skin, hair, and nails. So I talk about hemp seed oil in my book, sesame seed oil, pine nut oil, and the new mantra that we speak about, Dave, is hemp, hemp, hooray. And it's so healing because of the omega-6s, which heal the inside and the outside.
And so when you're talking about omega-6s, see, and this is something no one else is talking about. Everybody else out there is talking about avoid omega-6s like the plague.
Oh, I know, because they just rehash what's out there. Nobody's creative and thinking outside the box anymore, which really is very disturbing to me. Omega-6s can be altered, and then they're unhealthy. So I'm not talking about corn oil or canola oil or sunflower seed oil that's loaded with chemicals or has been chemically altered or heated with a lot of high heat or is exposed to air and light and so forth. Those are altered oils. But you can say the same thing for omega-3s. They're sensitive to heat, air, and light. We're talking about the pure, unadulterated omega-6s, and there's nothing like it to heal the cell membrane, which is important for children with neurological diseases, and I know that's a focal point of your group.
And that was one of the things when you were on Ben Greenfield's podcast, you were talking about those omega-6s being anti-inflammatory, and over the past several months, my son, we've been worried about his inflammation, and, it's causing a lot of behaviors, and we actually have him on ibuprofen to just control the self-injurious behavior and just to protect his brain while we figure out what's triggering the inflammation. But when I heard you talking about all these fats that we're avoiding, it can actually be anti-inflammatory. That's why I ran out and bought that bottle of sesame seed oil, expeller pressed organic sesame seed oil. And the hemp seeds, which again we were completely avoiding because of all the omega-6s.
Well, right, but I'm glad that hemp seed oil and hemp is making a comeback because it's getting more people into the space of CBD oil as well as the hemp seed oil, which is the oil from the seed of the hemp. But it's extraordinarily high in the perfect ratio of those sixes to nines, which is 4-to-1. So for your son and anyone suffering from any kind of challenge, neurological challenge, anybody in the autism spectrum, 1 to 2 tablespoons of hemp seed oil a day will be very, very healing. You'll first see the difference on the skin and then in the nervous system itself within a month. I promise.
So just 1 to 2 tablespoons of hemp oil?
Hemp seed oil, and you don't heat it. You don't heat it because it's very sensitive to heat, air, and light. But you put it in a salad dressing, for example. I would take away all of this coconut oil, ridiculous stuff that I'm hearing about. I would use hemp seed oil. It's an essential fatty acid. Our children, our adults, our infants are all deficient in omega-6s, which is essential as a healing element for every tissue, membrane, as well as every cell in your body.
Right. Okay. So just for clarification's sake, you're not necessarily saying that coconut oil is bad, right?
I'm saying that it can't displace omega-6s.
Okay. So up the omega-6s and maybe try and keep a balance with the coconut or the MCT oil. Because
coconut oil does not contain essential fatty acids. Hemp seed oil, flaxseed oil, fish oil, walnut oil, sesame seed oil to some degree. All of those, as well as perilla oil, have the omegas in them, which we're very deficient in. And if there's an issue with the cell membrane in your nervous system, you want those omega-6s. You can even get them in something like black currant seed oil or little borage oil, or even, let's see, what else can you get? You can get it in evening primrose oil. But you should be able to get it easily if you go to the health food store and put a little hemp seed oil on your salad dressing. 4-to-1 in favor of omega-6 is what we've ignored all these years. So the omega-6s have been unduly maligned and misunderstood, and I am here in this book that everybody should read to get the record straight. You'd be amazed at what's happening with people on the right omega-6s.
Gotcha. So we do still need omega-3s. We just need to keep it in check with a 4-to-1 ratio in favor of the omega-6s. The right good quality omega-6s.
The unaltered, yes, non-degenerate, non-denatured omega-6s. And there's a special oil that I talk about in the book, and I don't know if you're going to ask me a question about this, but I'll throw it in, because my good friend Ben Greenfield was very interested in this, and this was the pine nut oil. What I discovered is that pine nut oil has an essential fatty acid called pinoleic acid, very similar to gamma-linoleic acid, which is an omega-6. It will heal esophageal erosion, problems with GERD, problems with leaky gut, and H. pylori. So if you take that, in addition to the hemp seed oil, you'll be healing yourself from the mouth to the anus. You should excuse the expression, but it heals from within. The hemp seed oil will heal from without. What a beautiful combination.
Gotcha. And so how much of that would we need to take in order to get that healing benefit of the pine nut oil?
It's a pricey oil. I like the Siberian. I think it's called Siberian Tiger or Tiger Naturals. It's all in the book. The
Yeah.
particular one that we used for the clinicals that I did on my own little group that we worked with for about 3 months before the book was released. And I would say it's a teaspoon to a tablespoon a half an hour before meals. So if you've got irritation in the gut, H. pylori, the beginning of an ulcer, leaky gut syndrome, or any other kind of IBS, any kind of disorder with the colon or the gut, I would take that to heal that, number one. If you have esophageal irritation or any kind of erosion, I take at least 1 teaspoon to 1 tablespoon, and that should be 20 minutes before meals. It is absolutely amazing in terms of healing that and helping with any kind of GERD or heartburn situation. It's almost magical. It works better than anything I've ever used for my clients.
So you just take like a big, half a shot glass of pine nut oil just all by itself?
Down the hatch. You betcha.
Okay. We can do that. All right, so you kind of alluded to the linoleic acid and the gamma linoleic acid. So let's talk about those parent essential oils, because it's one of the misjudgments that I made. Like I'm at the store looking at the ingredient labels, and I'll see something called high linoleic sunflower oil, and I immediately put it back thinking, oh, that's got to be ultra processed and can't possibly be good. But in your book, I learned that linoleic acid is one of those parent essential oils. And by essential oils, I mean essential fatty acid, not like peppermint essential oil. But you talk about high linoleic acid being actually one of those really good omega-6 fats. So can you just talk about the 3 parent essential oils and maybe give us a couple ideas of why they're good and where we can find them?
Well, you've got the flaxseed oil with the alpha-linoleic acid, which is linolenic acid, I should say, which is also good. This is like alphabet soup, the ALA, the LA, and so forth. So I would say the linoleic acid, which you can get in a denatured, unheated sunflower seed oil, very good for the cell membrane. You can get it in hemp seed oil, and you can get it to some degree in the sesame seed oil. So that would be number 1. And safflower seed oil, very, very healing. And some people, for some reason, Dave, do better on one than the other. So it's kind of a thing that you have to try on for size. And then you've got the alpha-linolenic acid, which you can get in flaxseed oil, which is another precursor. It's another parent oil. And that has been found to be very good with women that have a predisposition to breast issues, breast cancer. So then you've got the flaxseed oil, and also good for the brain, good for the gut, good for the joints. That has been found to be very helpful for children that are suffering from ADD or ADHD. So a little bit of that in the diet, in a smoothie, in a salad dressing goes a long way. Now, you can't cook with these oils because they're very sensitive to heat, air, and light. So you have to have them in no heat recipes.
That was one of my questions about flax seeds, because I've always heard that flax seeds are easily oxidized, and most flax on the market is no good. So is that true? And if not, how do we choose the right source of flax?
Well, if you have a concern, you want to make sure that there's a little bit of rosemary extract in the oil and that you use it up within 3 weeks. And you can tell by that bitterness that you get at the end of your tongue, so to speak, when you take a little flaxseed oil. But if you're concerned at all, then just use the flax seeds, which are highly impervious to heat, air, and light. You can even bake with them. So I would use the flax seeds, maybe 3 tablespoons to a tablespoon of oil. And I've used that for years with my ADD and ADHD children. And I put them in a little bit of non-gluten cereals, for example, maybe a kind of rice mix or gluten-free, grain-free granola type thing where you use a little bit of flax seeds, or you just put it in a smoothie. So you can do quite a few things with that, or even hemp seeds for the omega-6s. It's very easy. And I want to revisit the coconut oil. Coconut oil is very healing, and people will be all up in arms because I've said this, but it does not displace the essential fatty acids. I feel I need to say that for a little bit more emphasis. It's not an essential fat, and most of us did not come from a line of genetic predispositions to eat a lot of coconut. I mean, some of us are from Northern Europe, some of us are from Eastern Europe, and there was not a coconut on the trees there. So you want to eat the kind of oils that are cold water oils, cold water fish oils, as well as that sunflower and sesame seed oil.
Gotcha. Okay, so in your book, you have these radical rules. You have 5 radical rules, and we've already kind of talked about the first one, which is revamp your fats. And so let's dive into sort of what I think is really interesting, and is radical rule number 2, and restoring your gallbladder. And of course, it's not the sexiest thing to talk about, but
Very unsexy. It's a throwaway organ, the gallbladder.
Yeah. And it's where we find sort of what I would say is the holy grail for health and healing, and of course that's the bile. So you talk about the bile being the forgotten switch. So do you want to talk about why bile is so important?
Yes, bile is just as important as probiotics. I'll repeat that again. And why is it so important? Because it's a detoxification method that we don't talk about. Bile does 3 important things in your body. The task number 1 is it breaks down fat. So if you don't have enough bile that's secreted at the right time when you're eating fats, you're not going to be digesting or absorbing essential fatty acids or healthy fats, number 1. Number 2, it flushes toxins. All of your extra hormones, exogenous hormone metabolites, and heavy metals are thrown into the bile. And number 3 is something that I talk about in this book that nobody else has written about, is it seems to have this alliance with the gallbladder, so that when your body secretes bile and it breaks down the fat, it also has the ability to secrete an enzyme that transfers T4 into T3. So there is an holy alliance between the bile, the gallbladder, and the activation of the thyroid. That's quite unusual, but there's good science to support it.
And so we all need to make sure that we have a healthy bile flow, because otherwise, even if we're eating the cleanest, most pristine diet in the world, doesn't make a difference if we're not digesting the food that we're eating. So you talk about most of us have toxic bile, and so can you talk about what that means and what we might see if we have toxic bile?
Well, the bile is congested because there are not a lot of natural thinning agents, because there's a lack of particular nutrients in the diet, which is why you need the bitters to thin the bile so that all the toxins can flow freely in your system and out for elimination. And you also need elements like bile salts to break down the toxins. If you do not have a gallbladder, so you're missing the timed release of bile in the first place, so you're not digesting all the fat that you're eating, which gives me a lot of pause to really look at what's going on with the ketogenic diets, a keto and paleo diet, which is much more high fat. A lot of people can't digest all that fat. It's why there's a lot of pancreatitis and kidney stones and problems with muscle strength that we're beginning to see with people on other high-fat diets. Fat is very difficult to digest unless you have the right bile, the right bitters, the right thinning agents, which is why in my book I teach you how to make your bitters, and I tell you the importance of bile salts and certain elements like the bile builder, which I created, that have a little bit of beetroot, a little bit of lipase, and another fatty acid, which is an amino acid actually very important to break down bile, which is called taurine. So you need a lot of different elements that are lacking in today's diet to be able to counter the high-fat diet. So you're eating a lot of fat that is not being circulated properly and is making people actually more toxic. Yes, you can lose weight, but there's a great deal of toxicity that comes with that particular element.
See, that's so interesting. As you were talking, I started applying what you were saying and thinking about myself. And I've been paleo probably at least 4 or 5 years now. And when we first went paleo, I probably lost about 80 pounds. And over the past year, I've gained about 30 of that back. And no matter what, I can't lose it. And I tried keto, and it made me feel worse. And so I'm wondering, I'm thinking I probably wasn't digesting that fat good enough, and so all the butter and the coconuts and coconut oil that I was eating was probably contributed to why I feel like crap today. Even though I'm eating what everyone is telling me is healthy, I'm not digesting and absorbing anything. So
And your body does well on short term on a higher fat diet. And yes, you can balance your blood sugar, lose your seizures. I mean, there are a lot of benefits. Don't get me wrong. I've been out there a long time. I know that ketogenic diets and a keto program and a paleo program in the beginning is very healing. But long term, people are all suffering from the same kind of things that you're talking about, which is why you need to get radical and follow my program, because you can maintain some of those good elements, but you can assist in the digestive piece which is missing and the detox piece that is missing in those other programs.
Yeah, and here's the part of your book that I did not like, and it's only because these are kind of my favorite foods. But you talked about common sensitivities, like 3 common sensitivities associated with the gallbladder. And number 1 was eggs, 2 was onions, and 3 was pork. I don't eat a lot of pork, but I eat a boatload of eggs and onions, like daily. So do I really need to give up my eggs and onions?
You do for 21 days, and
Okay.
this is short term. This is not forever. But what the point is, when people read the book, they'll see there's a reason that I select those particular 3 foods. You give them up for 21 days. You can go back to them every 4 days. You do it on a rotation program, but you give your gallbladder and your bile a rest, because they can be very pro-inflammatory if, in fact, you've got an issue going on with the gallbladder that's so important with the liver as a sister organ.
So is that kind of for everyone, or is that just for
it's for everybody. Eggs are highly allergic to many people, and they don't know it. And one of the reasons that you could be feeling the way you are is because of the allergic or food sensitivity, pro-inflammatory aspect of all those eggs. You know, a little bit is good, but when you're on one of these diets, you know, you're eating tons of eggs and ton of fat and ton of onions, and a lot of that really affects your ability to digest and could be an inflammation-producing element. But it's all pretty much explained in the book without giving away all the keys to the kingdom. But people feel dramatically better. They lose weight. And again, it's an elimination diet. Nothing is forever.
Okay. So let me ask you, do you know of any, so I use onions mainly as like a flavor component to my cooking. What would you suggest I use in replace of onions
Shallots.
For that month? Shallots? Oh, you can use those?
Yeah, it's just the onions.
Okay, good.
This is so easy peasy.
Talk about the role stomach acid plays in healthy bile.
Stomach acid is the forgotten genie. It's the forgotten genie. HCl is so important. If you're under stress, you're not secreting. If you're over the age of 40, you're not secreting it. If your blood type is A, you don't secrete it as much. You're probably hypochlorite. You have hypochlorhydria is actually the clinical term. So the reality is that when your body secretes stomach acid, it keys in the gallbladder to secrete the bile. So it releases the bile. The gallbladder is like the storage tank for the bile. If you do not secrete HCl, which the majority of Americans don't for all the reasons I've just spoken about, then you're not producing bile. So you have to substitute alternatives, whether that's HCl salts that you can take or an HCl digestive acid or bitters, which have the same proponent. And I talk about how to make your own bitters. We talk about the importance of certain foods that can produce HCl. Vinegar is one of them, apple cider vinegar. But HCl is incredibly important, and of course it's long forgotten.
Yeah, and where so many people are on these acid blocking drugs, it's just making us sicker. I know when I did my whole traditional medical checkup, this was thankfully I knew some things when I went to see, and they did their barrage of tests, and they were like, yeah, I don't know, here, try some acid blocking drugs, and I was like, no thanks.
No thank you.
Like, really, I just wanted to get a scope and make sure there wasn't anything serious. And since there's nothing serious, then okay, I know that you don't know anything to help me because you just said here.
Well, the other element of that, it's not just that we're lacking HCl, and a lot of times feelings of GERD or heartburn are actually a lack of HCl. So there's kind of this fine line, but you have to go a little deeper and look under the hood one more time. Sometimes people have a structural natural or mechanical imbalance, which could be a hiatal hernia where the stomach is pushed up. So you have to get that pushed down, and that may end your problems right then and there. So you have to become a nutritional detective. I've written about this in a number of books, including, of course, Radical Metabolism. But I would say that stomach acid is a key player, because if you do not secrete enough of it as you get older for various and sundry reasons, then you're not digesting protein, you're not breaking down iron or calcium, because those are iron-based minerals.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about how estrogen affects the gallbladder and, of course, through the gallbladder, the bile.
Well, estrogen, if it's not broken down properly in the liver, then all those metabolites are thrown into the bile, and it makes it very congested, and then your body secretes more cholesterol. So you've got to make sure that you're breaking down the estrogen metabolites, the xenoestrogens in the environment, or the estrogens that you're even getting from phytoestrogens in your food, and you do that by supporting the liver. That's where your lemon and water come in handy, a supplement called DIM, cruciferous vegetables, or calcium D-glucarate. Lots of different things that you need to do as we get older. So estrogen is an important element to consider, because it can be toxic estrogen if it's thrown into the bile and your body can't eliminate it properly.
Got it. And doesn't estrogen send the signal to the body to produce more bile?
Yes, it does,
it even more congested
and more cholesterol.
Yeah. And so I've only heard this from one person, but I wanted to ask you, since you kind of know everything.
I've had I don't know everything. I've just had a lot of practical experience. There are a lot of people that write books that haven't had the experience. So I can tell you from my own experience, and I would never tell you something that I don't know, either from clinical research or my own experience. So go ahead and ask me this crazy question.
Well, I've heard stevia. Stevia is like, the best, sweetener to use, aside from, it's the best sweetener to use. But I heard on a podcast, I can't remember which one, I won't throw them under the bus, but that stevia had high estrogen compounds in it. Have you heard of that?
No,
okay.
But what I will tell you is that for more and more people, they're becoming more sensitive to stevia, the way they become sensitive to sucralose in the past, or even sugar. So quite frankly, if I need a sweetener, a natural sweetener, I'm going back to maple syrup, 100% maple syrup.
And is that, you prefer grade A or grade B, or does it matter?
I think it's the grade B. I think it's the grade B that I prefer, whatever is organic and unfiltered, because I know from that research that there's certain antioxidants that are very helpful for diabetics. And there's nothing like a little maple syrup to just be very satisfying long term. And it's a natural food. That is my number one. It's lower in fructose than honey. Honey would be my second favorite sweetener, and then comes the stevia.
Okay, cool. Now, so you had mentioned some of the things to restore your healthy bile, and one of the things that's good is choline. And I've been using sort of lecithin as a choline supplement, but in your book you said you were no longer recommending lecithin be used because there are better sources. Do you want to talk about that?
I've gone back to the lecithin. You're just fine with the lecithin.
Okay, yeah.
There was one study. No, I had to be transparent. There was one little study that shed a little concern about that. But to be quite honest with you, a non-GMO soy lecithin, 1 to 2 tablespoons a day, keeps everything flowing properly. Great source of choline, or the sunflower lecithin, whatever you prefer. But that would be great for a child that has autism. Very good for the cell membrane. And the other thing to understand, Dave, is that if you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which has become rampant, you need choline. Choline within 2 months will decongest a fatty liver.
My last question about the gallbladder is, we don't have to do sort of like an intense gallbladder cleanse or anything like that to restore our bile, do we?
No, just do my 4-day intensive.
And you're kind of anti these cleanses, right?
I'm anti these cleanses because bile stones can get caught in the bile duct, and they can be life-threatening. So less is more. Easy does it. If you do my 4-day intensive, you're getting a proper juices that will cleanse the gallbladder, as well as my watercress soup, which is very gallbladder cleansing because it's a very high bitter. So the program is very much all figured out in the book, taking the right bitters, maybe do it yourself. You can go to the health food store, get some bitters, get some angelica root, get some, even some dandelion root tea is considered a bitter. There's so many ways to be able to deal with this situation. But if you're on a high-fat diet, you must at least read the book so you know what you're doing the right way.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to the next radical rule, which is rebuild your muscles. So what does our muscle mass, or our lack thereof, have to do with our metabolism?
Well, it serves as an innate calorie burner. So if you do not have lean muscle mass, you're not burning calories naturally. So one of the easiest ways to lose weight as we get older is to exercise, so you're constantly burning calories for 24 hours a day. And you do that with very I would say regimented exercise programs, whether that's weightlifting or super slow, which is something that I do. You can do that with high intensity exercise. You can do that with some of those oscillating plates that they now have on the market. It's just very important to move and stretch on a regular basis, which I know that we all know. I also, in my chapter, write about how sitting is like smoking, I guess is the new smoking. So now you should be standing up or walking when you're at your computer.
Yeah. Okay, and one of the things that struck me in this section was when you had some signs of protein deficiency, and I was taking notes, and after I wrote, I looked at them and I was like, oh my goodness, and I took a picture and I sent my wife and I said, does this sound familiar? And I was just like, check, like I have all the signs, and I'm like, okay, I need to jack up my protein.
Oh, you're not eating enough protein, do you think?
Apparently, well, you recommend about 100 grams a day now, right?
I don't know how old you are, but if you're over a certain age, you do
I'm
need
almost 39.
Oh, you're a young pup. But if you're under stress, you need more protein. If you're very active physically, you need more protein. I think more people need more protein, quite frankly. You could probably get that with some very good amino acids or some sort of protein powder.
Yeah. So can you tell us what the signs are of protein deficiency, and then...
Protein deficiency can be water weight. It could be a lot of fluid retention, number one. It could be a lack of stamina, number two. The inability to lose weight when you feel that you're eating properly, number three. Lack of protein also is poor muscle tone is really one of the greatest signs of low protein. A lot of people, when they're over the age of 70, are not eating enough protein. But it may not just be that you're not eating enough protein. You may not be digesting your protein, which is what concerns me. What is your blood type, Dave?
I don't really know.
Because a lot of our people that are A blood types do not secrete natively enough hydrochloric acid. And so it's not a matter of not eating enough, you're not absorbing and utilizing it proproperly. So I would look into that. If I were you, then let me know.
Actually.
I feel you're an A because of the nature of the questions you're asking me. You've actually read the darn book. You're asking me questions. You're very detailed. You're very analytical. You know what you're talking about. You are not just winging this. You are definitely an A.
Okay, so that tells me I need to be taking a hydrochloric acid supplement.
I feel that you do, and you can start on a low-level hydrochloric acid. We have one at Unikey Health Systems, if I may be so bold as to tell you that UnikeyHealth.com is the best supplements that I have seen, because I have helped for 30 years to formulate those supplements based upon what I've seen clinically, number one, and with my experience, number two. So yes, HCl plus 2 would be perfect for you.
Okay, got it. All right, and is there anything else you want to talk about that section before we move on to the next rule?
Yeah, something that I learned when I wrote that section is that the consumption of coffee, which I talk about in the book, has been found to be very helpful in preventing the decrease, preventing the loss of muscle mass, lean muscle mass. I'm trying to recall the exact study. But as we get older, we lose muscle mass every decade, past the decade of the fourth decade, 40, and you're almost 40. So a little bit of coffee will help you to retain that. And I think it's because there's a high degree of antioxidants in the right kind of coffee. I'm a big believer in the Purity brand coffee because, as I write about in the book, and I'm proud to mention these brands because you can't just get a pesticide-laden coffee and think it's going to help you. It is mold-free and pesticide-free, totally organic.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm thinking about trying that Purity protein because I'm just buying the regular organic coffee, on the shelf. So
It's good, and I think you can get a 10% discount with ALG10. I think we're giving people a discount. If you go on my website, I think you get a discount. But here's the reality. If you can't tolerate caffeine, you can get a caffeine-free variety. So it's a terrific source, and you can use it as a coffee enema as well. I bet you didn't think of that.
I actually did think of that.
You would have thought of that as an A positive blood type.
I do actually do regular coffee enemas, and we're actually having a podcast with Wendy Myers on coffee enemas here next week. So,
well, I've been a big believer in coffee enemas for the past 10 years. I've known about them since the work of Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, who is a very close associate who worked in the field of integrative cancer therapy, and they were one of the staples that people did on a daily basis, sometimes twice a day, to reduce the toxicity in the liver and the bile. So coffee enemas are here to stay. That's why purity is so important. You want the best coffee, regardless of how you're inserting it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that next radical rule, which is the all-important gut health, repairing your gut. So,
yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, and that shouldn't be too radical for people. We now know that the gut is very related to the brain, and that if you want a skinny gut, you need to have you can have a skinny waistline with a skinny gut. You have to have the right probiotics. You need to eat a certain amount of fermented foods, and you have to reduce your exposure to chlorine, which reduces the beneficial probiotics and sugars, as well as even some natural antibiotics in the health food market. I mean, that's where the colloidal silver and what is it called? The natural oregano oil can actually wipe out beneficial bacteria. So you want to be very careful. There's also
a silver can. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, these are very effective, but they can hit the beneficial bacteria as well as the pathogens, as well as a tea that I used to recommend all the time for people with mold or fungus or yeast, which is Podarco or Tahibo, can actually reduce your ability to maintain a proper balance of probiotics. So you've got to supplement therein. Yeah, and less is more. I don't think that getting 50 billion CFUs is necessarily healthy. I wouldn't take more than 10 CFUs per time that you're taking the probiotics. So
Gotcha.
This is all very, very radical because nobody's telling you that. Everybody says more is better. I say less is more.
Yeah, and you're right. That probably is the only real radical thing you have in that as far as repairing your gut. That's at least the gut health thing is finally coming into the mainstream, and we are all kind of in agreement of the leaky gut causing inflammation and immune problems and things like that. But you said you're a fan of fermented foods, which I am a fan of. I've written several pieces and I have a few recipes on my site about fermented foods. But I'm curious about how you feel with kombucha, because I know you.
I don't like kombucha.
Okay, is it because of the fluoride or?
Well, that I found out later. I was one of the early testers of kombucha many, many moons ago and found that it can release wild yeast into your system. So I think it's a little unregulated. So I'm not a fan of it for most people. But I do like old-fashioned traditional miso from non-GMO sources. I'm a big miso believer, a little bit of sauerkraut. And I also like olives and brine, which is a source of probiotics.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, so the last question I have about gut health. I know you are a big proponent of glutamine supplementation to sort of heal and seal the gut.
For some people.
Okay, so yeah, I've always heard that glutamine can affect two things about glutamine. One is it sometimes can get transferred into glutamate, which is not something, especially in the autism community, that we want to happen, because that can spark behaviors and stimming and things like that. And then the other thing was that it could cause your blood sugar to spike. Is any of that true, or how do you feel about that?
I know what you're referring to. I've never seen it operate in any of my clients. It can be life-saving for some people that have lost a tremendous amount of weight or have had surgical issues where they can't absorb and they have leaky gut syndrome. So I would say the combination of a little glutamine, glutamic acid, as well as the pine nut oil would be a wonderful combination. I would use that dynamic duo.
And you take that 20 minutes before you eat? All right.
Yes, yeah. That together would be my go-to when it comes to any kind of leaky gut issue.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about the toxins. We've been talking a lot about detoxification on the podcast the last several episodes, and I'll refer people back to episode 12, I think, with Lee Segedy, where we talked about kind of detoxifying your home. But a few points I want to point out that you actually do have some radical ideas in this chapter.
Oh, good.
The first one is not so radical to me, but it might be to a lot of people out there who are still using aluminum foil. I don't have any aluminum in my kitchen, so I'm anti-aluminum. But talk about how you sort of using aluminum foil can, foil your efforts at healing.
Yes, it can foil your efforts at healing because it's very drying to the system. Number one, it's why we use an aluminum antiperspirant. That's what some people use. It's because of that drying mechanism. But it also impacts HCl as well as pepsin, the secretion of pepsin. And it interferes with the absorption of calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. We all know that there could be some interaction with aluminum in terms of brain health and cognitive decline. So we don't want to use aluminum if we can help it. Aluminum or aluminum foil. We use parchment and we get rid of the aluminum. And I give you a magnet trick, which is in the book, to really determine how you can figure out what's aluminum and what's not. Now, if there's an inner core of aluminum on some of the cookware, that probably is okay because it doesn't touch the food. But aluminum is toxic. I'd rather have a poisonous snake in my kitchen than aluminum.
Indeed,
I'll leave you with that.
Yeah. And so here's one of the radical things that you say in this book, and it's about your cookware as well. And it seems like everyone is on board with avoiding Teflon and things like that, but they all recommend cast iron. And so in the book, you talk about cast iron is not the best thing to cook in. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, because it leaches iron, and you have to start taking your iron levels. Most of us are really stockpiling iron to the tune of excessive amounts, which is affecting the brain, the gut, is affecting the liver, is affecting your brown spots, is affecting your heart. So iron overload is a really increasingly toxic issue, and it's becoming more in our awareness. So you have to test your ferritin levels and then get rid of your cast iron, because even if it's well seasoned, it's leaching. I have seen many of my clients turn around their health completely after getting rid of their cast iron. So I tell you what to do with your iron and how to test for that as well.
Interesting. See, if the people that recommend the cast iron are like, oh, if it leaches, it's just iron, and iron is good for you. But I guess the dose is the poison sort of thing.
Not if you're stockpiling iron, it's not good for you, and most people are. My ferritin levels have really skyrocketed since I bought the most expensive cast iron cookware, and no more. I've cast the cast iron aside.
Okay, so what do you use now instead of cast iron?
I use two things. I use an enamel-covered iron and clay. I use the Ramertov clay, which has the most delicious flavor because food cooks in its own juice, and it cooks by an infrared heating mechanism, which is exceedingly healthful. And I talk about all that in the book.
Yeah. Okay, and then what's so bad about using a microwave oven?
Because it kills the enzymes in food, number one, and it also affects it's the red blood cells and I think the white blood cells after about 20 minutes.
Yeah, so basically it's not really healthy food.
Well, it's not healthy food, but it also leaks because of the seals on the microwave oven. So if you test it with the meters, as I have done because I wrote a book about it, you have to stand at least 400 feet away or you're being exposed to microwave radiation. Yeah, it's like really radical, but you'll see. And these are there's so many easy tweaks and so many easy things that I tell people to do in radical metabolism. None of this is difficult. There's a substitute and alternative for everything we're taking away.
Yeah, and I gotta say I haven't used a microwave in probably 5-6 years, so I'm proud of that. When we had a microwave at our old house, we just used it as a storage, so we never actually used it. But how do you feel about those new air fryers that are sort of all the rage these days?
I'm neutral. I think they're okay.
Okay.
I know one thing, which I'll talk about in another podcast with you or in another book, and that is you avoid high heat and dry cooking. You really want high moisture, low heat. Just keep that in mind.
Gotcha. That's a good rule to live by, or to cook by.
Yes, to cook and to live by, yes.
All right, so we hit all the radical rules. Let's talk about your radical program. Can you give us an overview of what your radical metabolism program is?
There are 4 days of an intensive, which has juice and has a soup. It's got a delicious watercress soup. People lose 10 pounds in 4 days. A lot of it is water retention, but that's inflammatory fluids getting out of your system. And it gives people real hope that they can lose weight and feel great, number one. Number two, you follow with a 21-day reboot. You get rid of a few foods. You get rid of some of your coconut oil for 21 days. You get the omegas back in play, the 4-to-1 and for 6-to-1. You start with a little citrus blaster, which is a coffee-based beverage in the morning. People lose another 16 pounds in 21 days. And people not just lose weight, but their skin takes on a different texture. What I have seen with people that are on my program is that they get a lot of compliments on the tightness and the tone and the turgor, I guess is the word for it, of their skin. And at my age, when people stop me in the street and say, "What are you doing?" and I say it's the hemp seed oil, then I know I'm doing something right.
Turgor, that's a new word for me today. I'm gonna have to write that
down. You bet. It's the word of the day. It's a radical word of the day.
Okay, so I noticed as part of that program, you kind of have like 3 meals and 3 snacks, or 2 snacks and a treat.
Yeah.
Is that because that's what most people are used to, or is it because people with toxic metabolism need to eat smaller meals?
Well, we do this for people that are still hungry, that have an issue with food and are going to be eating snacks anyhow, so we're giving them better snacks and just changing around the choice of the snack, not changing the habit necessarily. And I'm trying to up the ingestion of omega-6s. So you will notice, as I'm sure you will, that each of the snacks contains a good omega-6 because I want to get that ratio in the reservoir of your tissues.
Gotcha. Okay, and then so where does intermittent fasting fit in? So for those of us that like to intermittent fast, can you work that into the program, or would you recommend not?
Some people can. I'm not personally crazy about it. I think it leads to unhealthy eating patterns and so forth. Some people swear by it. It can be miraculous or disastrous, and I talk about that in the book. Yeah, you can do it twice a week.
Okay, so do intermittent fasting twice a week.
If you would like.
Okay. And then, so do you just skip that breakfast meal, or do you sort of condense the window?
You condense the window a little bit.
Okay. All right. And then, so I know you recommend a couple of different supplements and things like that. So, but my question is the timing of things. Is there a best time to take sort of our choline or our glutamine? Well, you said the glutamine is 20 minutes right before dinner, but when should we be incorporating any of the supplements that we're taking? With
meals or after meals.
Okay. And that helps us absorb it better, or assimilate
yes, because you bet, because you're eating the right kind of fats that trigger the release of bile, and then you've got the bile salts that help with the promotion and detoxification of the bile. So it's the bile builder. We have a radical metabolizer. We have a thyroid. We've got some really key elements that people take so that they can up their metabolism, detoxify properly and adequately with the proper support, because they're missing so many of these key elements that they're not finding in their diet or in their supplement regimen.
Gotcha. And then, so sort of vegetable juices and things like that play a big role in your program. I've always sort of avoided juicing because just the cleanup mess of it. So I know we're worried about sort of, losing some of the nutrition and things like that, but can we make sort of our juices ahead of time, or maybe put something in there, maybe like a grapefruit seed oil or a grapefruit seed extract, to sort of preserve it for a few hours, or maybe even a day or two, or do we really need to make it fresh?
The vegetable juices are just for 4 days, and if it's too much bother, then skip it and go to the 21 days. I don't suggest that people make it ahead of time more than about 12 hours, quite frankly, and I don't think you have to put anything in there. You just pop it in the refrigerator.
Okay, great. Cool. All right, so if we are, let's say we're in a energy slump as we're in the middle of our radical reboot. So if when we get tempted to maybe reach for our sixth cup of coffee, our old reliable snack to give us that pick me up, what should we reach for instead, and so we don't sabotage our efforts?
A pickle.
A pickle.
A pickle. Why a pickle? Because it helps for sugar metabolism. It'll get your blood sugar up, and it has a little salt. And I find a lot of people that lose their energy in the middle of the day, which is the adrenal kind of downtime, need a little bit of salt, which really supports adrenal function. So I say keep a lot of dill pickles handy. It's amazing, and it'll help you lose weight.
Interesting. So it's just a standard vinegar dill pickle or a fermented?
Bobby's dill pickles.
Bubby's, okay. So a traditional fermented non-vinegar based pickle. Interesting.
You got it.
I'm going to try that. I have Bubby's dill pickles in my refrigerator right now.
Even as we speak. Wow.
Well, it's one of those low sugar snacks that I can give my son with autism, so that, when he's hungry, I don't have to give him, something too substantial. And it actually it helps him, so I bet it would help me. Why
yes,
didn't I think
it will.
of that? Okay, and then so sort of my last two questions, and this is specifically about our kids. My son has autism. A lot of kids now have autism, and our kids are sick, basically. Like ADD's running rampant, autism's running rampant, food allergies. So our kids can benefit from your radical ideas just like us grown-ups can. But is there any sort of shift or extra precautions that we would need to make if we wanted to use this program for our kids?
Well, they need the flaxseed oil. I would give them that flaxseed oil, which is so important for the ADD, ADHD, very important also as a component, but not the main component of the cellular membrane. And the hemp seed oil, exceedingly important. And I'd also try to include a kind of choline-based element, and that could be the non-GMO soy-based choline that we're talking about, the soy lecithin, non-GMO, or the sunflower lecithin. That would be very important for the cellular membrane. And anything that can gently detoxify the system of heavy metals, including something that can chelate aluminum as well as mercury. And in that regard, I would like to see a powdered greens like the one I created, which is called Unique's Daily Greens, because it has the best source of chlorella, which I find to be the most healthful in chelating heavy metals, including mercury and to some degree aluminum. So you want something gentle on a daily basis, Dave, to chelate those heavy metals and keep the system flowing.
Gotcha. I'm a big fan of chlorella. I started reusing it just a few days ago, really, or a couple weeks ago. But
love it. Cracked cell chlorella made in almost in a test tube, and the one that we use in our product was it's hydroponically grown, so there's no heavy metals.
Oh, excellent, nice. Okay, and so my last question, and I'm curious so what you're going to say here because of your extensive knowledge. 3 practical steps for any parent that any parent can take to help them raise a happier, healthier family.
I would say for the children to include flax seeds, maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons of flax seeds, which is very good for neurotransmission, very good for the brain, very good for the joints, good for the heart, good for the nervous system in general. So flax seeds to the rescue, number 1. It's high in that parent essential oil that we were talking about. For the child, let's keep them off of sugar, extensive amounts of fruit. I'm not a big believer in extensive amounts of fruit for any of these kids because too much yeast and candida can precipitate any of the behavioral problems that we see. And last but not least, something gentle on a daily basis to detoxify, something like the daily greens that I talked about from Unique Health Systems, something similar to that, as well as perhaps a little bit of charcoal. And I'd also throw that child, but put him into a bath of salt and soda once a week, or apple cider vinegar once a week. Actually, apple cider vinegar once a week and salt and soda. Salt and soda reduces EMFs and radiation from non-ionizing and ionizing sources. And the vinegar is very good to acidify the system in a healthy way and is a high source of potassium, which I find many of these kids are lacking.
So just plain white vinegar or like apple cider vinegar?
Apple cider vinegar.
Okay. And then salt and soda, you mean Epsom salt and baking soda?
No, sea salt and baking soda.
Oh, really?
Yeah, forget about the Epsom salts. It's too draining for a child.
Okay.
I really like the 2 cups of baking soda, and I think I hope it's in this book. I've written so many books, I forget which one is in what. But it's either in this book, or if you follow me at AnnLouise.com and you go to RadicalMetabolism.com, you'll see some tips and tricks in that regard. But that's very important, because when it snows and when it rains, there's a lot of radiation that comes down, and that's affecting your child. It's affecting you, and it's affecting your child. So we do 2 cups of baking soda, 2 cups of sea salt in a bath for 20 minutes.
That's so interesting, because kids with autism often have behavior problems that surround weather changes like that. So that's really, really interesting.
Really radically healthy. It's been around for 40 years.
Yeah, so you triggered another question I wanted to ask you real fast, because you're the first lady of nutrition. And so a lot of us who are doing these paleo diets and things like that, or low-carb diets, we're parents. And so what's sort of like the target, the best macro ratio for a kid? Like,
quite honestly, I go back to a ratio that I have stuck to in all of my books, and that's 40-30-30. I think 70-20-10 or whatever the ridiculous paleo keto ratio is not doable. I think it's unhealthy. Long term, everybody, long term, I like a 40-30-30. 40% fat, 30% carbs, 30% protein. And of course, it's the right kind of carbs. We don't have a lot of simple sugars. We don't have grains necessarily, but we do have starchy vegetables, which I think kids need.
Right. Perfect. All right, Ann Louise, this was an absolute pleasure and an honor to talk to you. You already said your website, AnnLouise.com and RadicalMetabolism.com. What are you working on next? Are you got another book coming out?
Radical Longevity.
Oh, nice. And that's expected to come out
in a year or 2.
Well, this one's not too old, so. But you're sort of a book-producing machine, so I expected you to have something ready.
Well, the reality is that we need to set the record straight. You know, I've always kind of prided myself on rewriting the rules of nutrition, because there's so much out there that I feel is actually harming people that I want to get the record straight. And I'm in a position now to be able to do that, you know, with my experience, with the support that I've had from wonderful podcasters like you, and because I think the world needs a voice of sanity and reason, with somebody that has a little bit of wisdom out there that knows what she has experienced and what the trends are that have come and gone.
Well, I look forward to your next one, but I'm glad it's a couple years away, because that will give me time to get caught up on and read things like Zapped and guess what came to dinner. So,
thank you.
You have a good day, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.